Welcome, teachers and students, to today's episode of Everyone Has a Story, hosted by the Pikes Peak Business and Education Alliance. My name is Bob Gimignani. We are so pleased today to have with us Andy Vick. Andy is the Executive Director of the Cultural Office of the Pikes Peak region. Andy, thank you so much for volunteering some of your time today.
It's my pleasure, Bob. Happy to be here.
Andy, talk to us about the Cultural Office of the Pikes Peak region. What does your organization do? What's your mission, and who are the constituents and stakeholders that you serve?
The Cultural Office of the Pikes Peak region, also known as just the Cultural Office and sometimes by our acronym COPPER, we are a local arts agency. Really, we're in the business of helping our local arts community to thrive and grow. So our service area is all of El Paso and Teller counties, so this two-county Pikes Peak region. We support all the arts, visual arts, theater, dance, music, literary, poetry, film, culinary arts. It's a great arts community, always has been, and continues to be. Over the last, 5-10 years, whatever it is, as this city has also been coming up in many different and exciting ways, the arts community's also been coming up. The Fine Arts Center celebrating 100 years. There are so many arts groups doing amazing work. Our mission is to support those organizations and those individual artists who are doing the creative work, and then also to represent our creative community to the business community, to the tourism community, to statewide interests, and in some cases to national arts interests. Most of what we do for the community is free of cost. We operate a great website called peakradar.com. It is our community's cultural calendar. So if you wanted to find events or activities that were going on, you could see what's happening in our community.
Andy, so let's get right to your story. Think back to just a few short years ago when you might have been in middle school or high school. Did you have any thoughts back then about what sort of job you wanted to have when you grew up?
In high school, I was a really focused student. I got really good grades. I was very proud of that, and I wound up going to a good college and also did well in college. And when I went to college, I didn't really know what I was going to study. My freshman year roommate in college was pre-med all the way, and he knew that's what he was going to be. And we used to always joke about it that I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was there at school just to get a good education.
Tell us how you went from having this sort of let life come to you attitude to where you are today with an impressive resume in the arts, being an executive director of a really cool nonprofit.
My father actually encouraged me. He said, take a broad range of subjects and find something that was interesting to you. So my freshman year, first semester, I took astronomy, philosophy, history, and I fell in love with the class. And I just found myself getting really excited by learning that subject matter, which I never knew anything about. And so I wound up majoring in history, in medieval history. I graduated from college. I didn't have a real plan of action. I wound up having a friend who was doing an internship on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Long story short, I moved out to Washington, D.C. into a group house. And I actually just got my first real job after college by answering an ad in the newspaper, in the Washington Post, for an administrative assistant at a government contracting company. I had some really wonderful mentors at my first job. Several of my bosses were just so helpful to me. I will say, ironically, during orientation, sitting across from me was my future wife, who was just hired to be a graphic designer. I moved up. I had several different jobs within that company. I became the human resource manager. At a certain point, the president of our company decided to leave to start his own business. And he asked me to leave with him and to join him in his new startup business. As it turned out, that startup business did not sustain. And as it was coming to its end after a couple of years, my wife had sort of left the graphic design world and got into the craft world, making jewelry. And I quit my job with the startup company and I went to work with my wife. So that's what got me into arts. Very unintended. This really was a fun opportunity to go into business with my wife and to support something that she was very good at and she had started to build. Along the way, started volunteering with a local arts organization on their board. When the opportunity came along, I stepped into a director role. Did that for 10 years, ran a local arts agency. Then my next career move was to go to a bigger community. So from where I was, I saw an ad for the job that I currently have at the cultural office of the Pikes Peak region about 7 years ago and was ultimately hired in 2014 to come out and lead this local arts agency. So similar kind of work to what I was doing before, but a bigger community, a bigger budget, bigger opportunities. And so I've been doing that for the last 7 years almost and really enjoy it. And it's an exciting time to be here in Colorado Springs. So many great things are happening. And my job is to really make sure that the arts benefit from all those great things and help to contribute to the community to make it an even greater place.
Andy, what would you say is the biggest single professional challenge you have faced in your career, and how did you overcome that?
Sure, you run into issues all the time, projects that don't manifest. Sometimes people will disappoint you. Sometimes a grant that you expected to come in didn't come in, and you have to pivot and spend less money and manage your dollars in different ways. But I've been really fortunate that I haven't had that kind of critical challenge that I would say defines me in any way. But it's also, right, you align yourself with good people, work with smart people who you can depend on to help mitigate when challenges can arise.
Can you give an overview of perhaps the types of positions that might be available in our community in other organizations that are in your industry that those students could explore and learn more about?
In our community alone, a study we did recently, there are over 5,000 jobs in nonprofit arts and culture in the Pikes Peak region. Nationally, the arts sector employs and generates, I think it's like 4.5% of the gross domestic product. So if you factor in Broadway and Hollywood and all these places that are creating arts and culture, it is a huge industry in our country, a huge industry in Colorado, and in our community as well. It's very substantive. So there are many different kinds of opportunities. In our office, particular at the cultural office, we have 4 full-time generalists. I come from with a little bit of visual arts background. My deputy director comes with a little work in the museum and children's education background. The 2 other staff folks are fairly young. So if it's a field you're interested in, being whether you're a dancer, a singer, a musician, a poet, whatever, having some of your own personal experience in the art world is a great entree into this career sector. You don't have to be an artist, but in the doing work in the space and having some connection to that is really good. There's also lots of technical needs, managing theaters, costume design. If you get into film and all the various roles that you can play as an editor, as a producer, as a director. So there's endless opportunities. It really depends on what your particular interest is as you get older and what direction you want to go, whether you want to, again, be a producer or an administrator, make acquaintances, learn how to socialize with people, learn how to be a good speaker, being a solid writer, a solid communicator is the kind of thing that's going to see you through no matter what you do.
Andy, what would you say to your teenage self, knowing what you know today?
When you're younger, you feel like you're invincible. And the amount of junk food that I ate growing up, all amazing, and I loved every minute of it. But when you get older, you get to the reckoning place where you realize you can't do that anymore. So I would tell myself, you can't eat junk forever. At some point, you got to pay the piper, and reality will call.